So what I'm going to talk about today a bit is I'm going to touch on actually a lot of points that previous speakers were talking before and summarize it a bit in how I view that. The general question basically of this TEDx is, do you believe that young people can actually change something in the world and can have a significant impact that has a global reach? When I went to high school, I was learning about a lot of different aspects of our globalized society, and actually I was puzzled. The more I learned, the less I understood. I was puzzled with questions like, how is it possible that even though the global economy is getting wealthier every year, yet social injustice increases, such as poverty? And also looking at our consumer behavior, how is it possible that children working in sweatshops every day, just that I can buy a t-shirt for €5, even though I could actually spend more money on it? Or looking at public health also doesn't make any sense. In the OECD countries, obesity and diabetes are increasing. At the same time, the average per capita chocolate consumption is also increasing. And then I ask myself a question, why do we need to eat chocolate every single day in the first place, especially given that it's farmed by people who are so poor that they probably will never eat chocolate in their entire lives? Yeah, so the main question that actually I was thinking about is, why did my life as a 17-year-old European matter more than the life of a 17-year-old in a developing country? Because I was raised and educated with the values and beliefs that all human lives matter and that every human being has dignity. However, in reality, I couldn't see anything of that happening in the world. And as Dexter Holland described it, the world is crying, but nobody's listening. Please leave a message on my cell phone. I got frustrated and angry with all the questions that I had. And that frustration and that anger made me angry at companies for doing business in an unethical way. And I got angry at politicians for not driving political change. And I got angry at society with that entire mentality where we buy things we don't need from the money that we don't have to impress people that we actually don't like. And with my frustration and with my anger back then, I didn't know any other way of how I could handle that, and I just wanted to express myself. I wanted to express my frustration and my anger, and I did that by making music. And as you can see, if my talent for music would have been fantastic as my hairstyle, then probably I would be also performing on stage today instead of talking to you. But that was the only way that I knew back then, yeah? And I can tell you and I can assure you that probably none of the teachers in this room would have loved to have me as a student because I was just causing trouble, because I was always angry and frustrated. So time passed on, and then I thought okay, maybe I go to university, and if I study a bit, then I understand more about these problems, and yeah, let's see how that goes. And it was years later that I started realizing that so in high school, I challenged everyone and everything around me, yeah, every single person. And it was that I realized years later that, yes, the world is full of misery and full of problems. I just became very pragmatic about it and accepted it. And I thought, okay, but I, as an individual, do not want to contribute to more misery in the world. That's the only thing that I can do. And more importantly, what I learned in the recent years when I got much older and in university was that actually no problem in the world was ever solved by being angry. It took me many years to come to that conclusion. And I also came to the conclusion that I have challenged everyone and everything around me when I was in high school. However, I have never challenged myself. And I came to the realization that I am the one who has to change, and I cannot rely on others to change anything for me. I'd rather have to fix it myself. And I mean, we have seen a lot of fantastic talks today from a lot of inspiring people. However, you might say that, like, okay, I'm young and so on, just like, that is just dreaming and it's just idealistic. And if you are skeptical about the idea that one person can change something, I absolutely agree with you. You are absolutely right. But the problem and the issue with most people today is that their problems that they're chasing are not big enough. They're just caught up with the small problems that we have every day. Oh, I need to get a good grade in the next exam. I need to go into this uni because then I can study that. Or they're like caught up with the problem, so yeah, if I work out a lot, then I'm going to be very handsome, and then that girl will go out for a dinner with me. So these are the small problems that most people are chasing. However, once you start chasing the big problems, and that's what we saw today, when you start chasing these big problems, you will come to realize that you have to gather a crowd around you who will join you. And I personally witnessed it, and that's why I started believing in the collaborative power of youth. Because young people have always been at the forefront of significant social change. Just think of the fall of the Berlin Wall in my home country, or also the Arab Spring that we had recently in the recent years. Because young leaders imagine a world that is worth fighting for. And this generation of young people that we see today is very different from previous generations. And that is because the world today is very different, and they grow up in a very different world. And this generation of young people is all about very different spirit. The spirit is about positive impact, sustainability, and entrepreneurship. Because recent global study suggests that over 50% of millennials are willing to support companies and purchase products from companies that support causes that they care about. And at the same time, a global study asking more than 40,000 young people, they stated that 64% or 61% of them want to become an entrepreneur in the future. But at the same time, they do not have enough guidance, and they feel they do not have enough support in getting there. And also, the majority of them said that they prefer experience-based learning as the #1 method of acquiring new skills and learning new knowledge. So, as you can see, we're looking at a young generation that is craving for change, and yet at the same time want to do business at their preference. And this is one of the aspects that we are addressing with our movement, where we unite a whole generation to stand up and to take action against modern-day slavery. And at the same time, they can learn their first steps as a young entrepreneur and as a young leader. Where we're fighting an illegal business that generates more than $150 million every single year. And where we're speaking up for the freedom of over 35 million slaves that we have in the world today. That is more than we had in any time of human history. So it started, the students, they come together and they run a continuous 24-hour relay race in order to create urgency and to bring the cause to public attention, and to fundraise to support small charities that would not be able to access that support that we have in such a wealthy society like Hong Kong. And it started in 2010, where 180 young students from all over Hong Kong came together and ran the race. And together they fundraised more than $30,000 to support a small charity that is working in Nepal and in India. And with that single fundraising, back then, that charity could rescue over 50 children who were trafficked from Nepal to India, where they worked in exploitative orphanage and circus businesses. But it even goes beyond that. In the course of this rescue operation, 8 traffickers got arrested. An entire trafficking route from Nepal to India got shut down, and it includes also the exploitative orphanages where the children were enslaved at. And the students came together back then because they knew it mattered and because they knew it would make a significant difference for the life of others. And that was under the leadership of a handful of young people. And ever since, our movement has grown substantially. Last year alone, over 2,000 students came together and were engaged in our races. And those races happened simultaneously in 3 cities. And we fundraised more than $250,000 US. And we're not only supporting charities in Nepal now, but all over Southeast Asia. Local grassroots NGOs that work tirelessly in the field to rescue more children from slavery, prosecute traffickers, and even changing the way how the governments respond to the problem. It is that when you often are confronted with all these problems that are in the world out there, climate change, environmental pollution, poverty, injustice, slavery, like myself, you start feeling like, okay, there's nothing I can do, you feel hopeless, and you start being paralyzed. And I just have to tell you, like, I often wonder what great things I could have achieved 10 years ago if someone had shown me a better way instead of just being angry, where I actually could have taken action. And our movement is just one example of what a handful of young leaders can achieve, and how something small can grow into something huge with a global reach and a significant impact. As Ban Ki-moon said it last year, be proud to be young. You're not the leaders of tomorrow, you're the leaders of today.